100 years old. How does it feel?
Well, it doesn't feel any different than it did when I was 99.
What do you think? What do you think about your life from the very beginning till now?
Well, I don't dwell too much on what's already gone, because I have this feeling that yes, what's gone is gone. What's past is past, and I can't do anything about it. And what's coming tomorrow, I don't know. So I try to do the best I can and enjoy today. That's been my philosophy for some time. It's just keeping in mind that yesterday's gone and tomorrow isn't here, so live it up today.
What do you think your secret has been for...
What do I think?
What is your secret for keeping it going and not giving up?
I don't have any secret. But I just take it one day at a time.
What do you do when things get you down?
I'm sorry, but I don't.
What happens when things get you down? I mean, over this period of time, you've had problems and things that have gotten you down, and how do you work through all that?
Well, mostly whenever it's if I'm physically not well, that of course isn't very cheerful, and I have had, I'm a cancer survivor. I've lost all my insides and my outsides with cancer, and have been given up and have had severe illness, and that is always depressing, but I've come through it, and I feel fine now. So.
Can you talk a little bit about your very beginning here and how you came to live in Washington?
Well, I was born in southern Idaho, in a little town called Samaria, and we stayed there until I was in the 4th grade, and we moved to Pocatello, and that was the year of the great epidemic of influenza. They call it Spanish influenza. And we lived so that our back porch faced the street to the cemetery. And I remember being very ill at the time and lying there and just seeing the hearse after hearse go by. And many, many people did not survive that epidemic. And I was given up a couple of times, but had people from the church come and pray for me and so on. But I survived, and but I remember it well. And then we moved to to Boise. My father was working for the government. He was an internal revenue collector, and part of Idaho, part of Montana, and Washington was one district. And so he was moved to Pocatello, and then they made each state separate, and so he had to move to Boise, which was the capital. And we moved to Boise, and that was the year that I was in the 5th grade. But as I said, I had been very ill, lost all my hair, but by the time we got to the new school, it had grown out, which was a great relief to me. I do remember that very distinctly.
How old were you at that point?
How old was I? Well, I guess I was about 10. Well, I must have been. Yeah.
And how long was it before you moved here to Washington?
Well, we didn't move to Washington. I didn't move here until many, many years later, after I was married and had a family. And we had, my husband, Floyd, was working for Morrison Knudsen Company, and they build dams, of course, always in some backward place. And there was a eruption, the hill slid in, sort of like this New Orleans deal, and everything was destroyed. Our house was destroyed, and he was raising mink. They were destroyed, and we got out of there just barely, and that was it. And we had to, we had to find some other a job or do something. Anyway, I decided that I needed to go back. I needed to go to work, and my daughter was attending the university, so I went up, and she moved out of the sorority house, and we took a less expensive place to live, and I went ahead to get my degree because I hadn't had that, so that I could get a better job. And which I did. I went to a conference while I was there. They were having a conference in Spokane, called it the Inland Empire Educational Conference. And my advisor advised me to go over. She said, "You will meet people in education, and if I may find a place where I would get a better job." Well, I went, and it was there that I met Oliver Hazen. We sat together, or next to each other, doing a lecture and discussed it. And anyway, as a result of that, he offered me a job in Renton, Washington. And I didn't know where Renton was, but when he told me about where it was, and my daughter had a job in Woodinville, Washington, which wasn't that far away, I decided I would come over and see what it was like. And so I did. We drove over and decided to take a job in Renton, and I stayed there then until I retired. And then I did the extension work at the University of Washington, and I got an NDEA scholarship, which I thought was going to send me to the University of Washington, but it happened to be at Pullman, so that was how I happened to go over there and get my master's, was because it was getting paid for the scholarship that I had.
Okay, all right. So if you could start again, I didn't, because of the phone and stuff.
Well,
maybe just something that you remember particularly that was.
Oh, I remember.
That sticks out.
I remember World War I. I not too much about it, except that in this little town where we lived, we had a phonograph and had records, and we had the songs. I remember one of the songs that was important then, or popular. Yes, we have no bananas. We have no bananas today. We've string beans and onions, cabbages and scallions, and all kinds of fruit. But say, we have some old-fashioned tomatoes, Long Island potatoes. But yes, we have no bananas. We have no bananas today. Now that was the popular song at that time. And I know that the neighbors' kids used to come in and listen to our phonograph. Everybody didn't have a phonograph, and we did. We also had, the telephone was a party line. Our number was long and too short, and we learned other people's numbers, and when we'd hear it, it was the custom you could hear people taking down the receiver and getting the news. So though we didn't have TV and we didn't have the radio, but if news traveled, everybody knew what everybody else was doing in that little town. And anyway, we stayed there until the year that I was in the 5th grade. My father got an appointment from Woodrow Wilson, who was the president, to serve as Internal Revenue Collector, and it meant that we moved from the town to Pocatello, and because part of Montana, Washington, and Idaho was all a district. Then they made each state separate, and so we had to move to Boise, which was the capital of the state, and that was where his headquarters was to be. So we moved to Boise the year I was in the 5th grade, and we stayed there, and it was there that I went through grade school and high school, and then from there on to college.
Now, what was it like back then as far as your...
What was what?
What was it like back then as far as the transportation and how people got around? How did you get around?
That was something else. We had a car, and I remember we'd get making a trip. It was 8 miles into town, and we never once made the trip when we didn't have a flat tire. And when you had a flat tire, you had to get out the inner tube, you had to pump it up, you had to vulcanize it to patch it, and it was quite a process to get the car going again, which it seems incredible now when we think about it, but that's the way it was then.
So before you had the car, how did you get around?
Well, with the horse and buggy, and we made a trip with the school every year. It was 8 miles into this town, and it was an excursion, and they'd have a bonfire and heat rocks, put them down the middle of the sleigh, and then we'd sit along the side and put our feet out toward those warm rocks, put blankets over us and cover us. And we made this, it was an annual excursion that we had into town, which I said was 8 miles, and we'd go in, and we always went to the ice cream parlor, had a treat, and it was a big event back then.
So how many horses did you have? How many horses did you have?
Horses?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. We had a lot of horses on the ranch because they used them for the plow and the rake and everything. But when the war broke out, during the war, the government came by, and this I remember very well, them coming, and they looked at everybody's horses, and the ones that they thought they could use, they confiscated. And we had the 2 horses, Chub and Bell, and I remember asking my father, well, why did they have to take Chub and Bell? Because they were our best horses, but they were confiscated, and I'm sure that the government paid for them, but that you didn't have any choice. You had to sell them because they needed them.
What war was this?
And that was way back. You see, in 19. I don't know whether it was 9 or 10 or when.
World War
I can't
I?
remember the date. But
World War I then.
But I wasn't very old. I was born in 1906. It was a few years after that.
What else did you have on the farm besides the horses?
Oh, it was a wheat farm, and it was a dry farm. We lived in a little community where we had our garden and the cows and pigs and chickens and so on. But then we drove about 4 miles out to the dry farm, and it was called Pocatello Valley where we had it, and we had several hundred acres where we raised wheat. They raised turkey red wheat, and we had a little farmhouse there where when the thrashers, the headers came, my mother would go out there. We would have a cook that came and helped, and we went there for a short period of time. Well, one year, this I'll never forget. We looked up, there was a fire started, some campers had left, and the wheat field caught fire, and we got burned out. And because I remember it so well, my tears was in my father's eyes. He looked and saw it, and well, we just burned out. But that's how, and then he ran for a county assessor. Some of his friends said, well, we're going to get a political office because he was a very good speaker and was interested in politics. So he ran that year and got elected to that, and then he got into politics, and just a year or so after that, then we moved, as I said, to Pocatello, and then from Pocatello to Boise.
You say you got into politics. What What kind of politics? What kind of politics was it?
Well, he was a staunch Democrat.
And did he run for
And I
something?
remember when my younger brother was just little, and he'd say, "I'm American citizen. I'm true blue for Woodrow Wilson."
So he was supporting other candidates. He wasn't running for him.
No, that's right.
So he wasn't running for anything.
No, he wasn't running for himself.
What happened in the period right before? What happened in the period right before you left Idaho?
Before I left Idaho, oh well, I got married, and my husband worked for a construction company, Morrison Knudsen, and he went where wherever they sent him. Usually they were building dams, usually in the back country where they build dams, and that's how we happened to leave. We went to North Carolina because they were building a dam there, and we went to Arkansas, stayed there. So we lived in Arkansas, we lived in North Carolina, and eventually we came back to Idaho, and eventually from there to Washington.
So can you tell me a little bit about when you first got here, what you started doing?
When I first got
when you first got here to Renton.
Oh, to Renton. Well, they'd had this slide. The mountain slid in where we were working at Anderson Dam in Idaho, and we had this big, and everything was destroyed, and so we had to. Well, we just lost everything, and we thought the insurance was going to take care of it, but they, after some deliberation, they decided that they wouldn't pay the insurance because they said it was an act of God. Well, anyway, I knew that I needed to go back to work, and my daughter was at the University of Idaho, and I didn't have my degree then, but had considerable schooling, so I found out I needed just a few things in order to get the degree, and I needed the degree in order to get a better job, or a job. So I went up there. She moved out of a sorority house. We rented a house, and I went to finish school there, and got my degree that year. The same year as my daughter graduated from college together, and during this time I had gone to a conference, and I got into a discussion with a man at this conference in Spokane. It was called Inland Empire, and as it happened, he was the superintendent of schools for Renton, Washington, and was there really looking for teachers. And anyway, they offered me a job in Renton, and I didn't know where Renton was. I asked him how close it was to Woodinville, and because my daughter was going there to teach, because her husband was going to attend the university, finish at the University of Washington. Well, anyway, that's how I met them, and they offered me a job in Renton. I came over and decided to take it, and my husband came, and he had worked. They wanted to send him to South America, the company he worked for, but he couldn't take his family, so he started looking for a job here, and he got a job at Boeing, and he worked there then until he retired, and I worked for the Renton School District until I retired.
And what did you get your degree in?
At WSU.
What was your major?
Guidance and counseling.
And is that what you did?
That's what I got my master's in.
And is that what you did for your job? Is that what you did for your job the whole time?
Oh yeah, I got that. I had started to work when I finished it.
What did you get your bachelor's in? Your first degree?
Education. I don't think that it had anything except just education.
What What other things were you thinking about doing? What other things were you thinking about doing before you decided to become a teacher and counselor?
Well, I don't think I always was interested in being a teacher, and from teaching, as I said, I went into counseling, and I didn't have any desire for anything else.
And why was that?
Why was it? I don't know. I guess it's just the way I was made up. It was satisfying to me, and
did you feel you had something to offer to other people?
well, I hope so. I always tried.
Do you think that you did? Do you think that you did? Were you able to help people when you're in your job?
Well, as I said, I hope so, and I think in some instances I'm sure I did, because even as recent as 2 weeks ago, I got a letter from a girl that I had had in school back then, yeah, and she had still remembered some help, and it was a surprise to me to hear from someone after such a long period of time, and but I feel that I did the best I could. Whatever that's all anybody can do.
Let's talk a little bit about your husband. Where did you meet your husband?
In high school, when I was a freshman.
How did that happen exactly?
Well, his cousin was a girlfriend of my older brother, and I met him through her that way. Got introduced, and anyway, we dated off and on through high school, and after high school, we were friends, and we wrote. And I went to the islands, to teach very young. I went to the islands because my sister wanted me to come and help her. She was expecting a baby and had one, and she wrote and said she could sure use some help, and wouldn't I come over? And so I went. Well, as I said, I'd had some experience, and after I had been there a while, her husband got transferred to another island from the island of Hawaii, and when they got transferred, and in the meantime, a Caucasian teacher that was supposed to come there didn't show up, and they asked me to come and substitute, and I went over to substitute, teaching these children. They were mostly Japanese children, because at that time there were a good many Japanese that worked on the sugar plantations, and that was what they had there, and their main purpose was they had what they called a receiving grade, where these children had to learn enough English in order to fit into the regular school. And so anyway, they'd asked me to come and help this receiving grade get in an emergency one day, because we happened to live by the school. And anyway, I met with some success with these children in the receiving grade, and as a result, they offered me a job, and I found out what I had to do from the University of Hawaii in order to get the certificate to teach there, and I did that, got it, and it was of course temporary, and anyway, from then on I just kept taking courses on the side until I eventually got my master's, but taking a course now and a course then.
What was a lot of things have changed, over these years. What was dating like back then? What kind of activities, when you dated your husband, what would you guys do? go to the, malt shop, or
Friday night
things
we
like
had
this?
the dance. And well,
Was
we
this
had
at a hall, like a dance
ballroom
hall?
dancing. We did. That was the big thing. Every club, every organization, had dances, just regular ballroom dances. The waltz and the foxtrot were the dances, and we after a bit, I got into playing cards, playing bridge. I used to play bridge, and nothing that was that unusual.
Was there drive-ins and did you go to drive-ins? Drive-in theaters?
Not very often. We did go to drive-in occasionally when they were new, but we didn't particularly care for the drive-ins. But we had been to some. But that was much later.
What was the popular music back then?
Oh, popular music. I hear it. Yes, we have no bananas. And
swing? Was it swing music?
Yeah, but I can't recall particular tunes right off, but if they started up, I can sing them. And we had, when the war was on, of course we sang over there,
Now,
over there. The Yanks are coming, the drums rum-tumming everywhere. So beware, say a prayer. We're going over, and we won't come back till it's over there.
What was that? What was that like during that World War II?
Well, it was awful, because it seemed like whenever we did hear anything, it was always somebody. It would be about somebody being killed, but dying. I had many cousins and relatives, and then in the Second World War, of course, my own brother was killed in the Philippines. So, the war is awful.
What about the rationing and the ration cards and the recycling and everything? Were you involved in all that?
Yeah. Well.
Is that difficult?
Yeah. Housework was not as easy as it was. You swept. We've always had a broom and a scrub brush, and you usually had the pad of water, got down on your knees and had a pad and scrubbed the floor with a brush and rinsed it and wiped it dry, and that was it. Yeah. Always did it at least every weekend.
I'm going to skip a little bit back because I thought of something. During the 20s, there was alcohol prohibition. Alcohol prohibition.
Yeah, right.
What was your lifestyle like at that point?
Oh, well, of course, I was young then. It didn't affect me personally that much, but there was always something in the paper about somebody being raided or drinking. Lots of people that I knew, some of the, as we called the fast crowd, they always knew where they could get moonshine. A lot of different people made their own, it wasn't uncommon.
But you weren't drinking it?
No.
Did you ever drink?
I didn't. We did, in our family we were raised, we did, alcoholic beverages was off limits.
So you've never really drank? You've never really drank socially?
Oh yes, after years later, much later, after I was buried, had family, and actually I was completely teetotaler. We went to the doctor. I was had some medical problems, and I always remember my husband got such a kick out of it, because he had always liked to drink a little, and the doctor said, that he should give me wine. I guess that was to stimulate an appetite, But anyway, he said, see to it that she has wine every day. I remember he got such a charge out of that. I thought it was such a good joke.
And did you do that?
Yes, but we got it. And now I like wine. But that was how I happened to start doing it, was because the doctor prescribed it.
So you think you're still...
Oh, I never drink to excess.
Right.
That's it, but a glass of wine I still take on occasion.
What did you think of the 60s?
The what?
What did you think of the 60s?
50s.
The 60s.
60s. Well, let's see what happened, particularly in the 60s. That's been, I don't know what the 50s, 60s, they all seem more or less the same now. I can't think of anything.
Well, the Beatles, remember the Beatles? And
don't remember
the
what?
Beatles and the Beatles?
Oh, yes, I remember that hearing them, and they were very popular. By then we had, the TV was more on, see.
What was the first TV show that you watched?
Boy, I haven't the slightest idea. I can't, mostly we started with just a news program, but then eventually we watched everything. I don't recall anyone in particular.
Did you listen to a lot of the old radio shows before TV was invented? Did you listen to a lot of the old radio shows before TV was invented?
Oh yes, we had a radio and had lots of records, and we had the phonograph. It had, and I remember it had thick records, and we put you had the needle and played that. We played the phonograph a lot.
Do you remember where you were when John F. Kennedy was shot?
Let's see, where was I when Kennedy was shot? I'm not sure whether I was in Arkansas or I remember, of course, hearing about it and reading about it, but I can't tell you exactly where I was, or at this minute I don't recall. I think maybe I was right in Washington.
Did that change anything for you when that happened?
No, nothing particularly. I've always been, my leanings politically have been Democratic, and of course I felt badly to think that he was shot, and I remember very well the pictures of little John and of Carolyn, and yes, it was a sad time, and I'll always remember those pictures. There was a lot of things said about the Kennedys that I've had complete sympathy for them. And
what do you feel about the government now?
Well, I think that there's lots of room for improvement.
What do you think about the war that we're in now?
The what?
What do you think about the war that we're in right now with Iraq?
Yeah, I think it's very unfortunate, and I have not. I naturally would support I want to support our troops, our soldiers, wherever they are, but I was not a believer in us going to Iraq in the first place, and I'm still not convinced that it was a good move. But
We've been talking a little bit about wars and all the ones you've seen and over the last 100 years, you've seen them all so far. Modern wars and the invention of the guns, the machine guns, and things that nuclear bombs. And what do you think the future? What do you think the future is going to be for war?
I don't know. It seems like that it never. You always think it can't get any worse, but then about the time you think that something happens, and it is. And
well, you've been around to all these different countries and met people from all over the world. And do you think that people are pretty much the same wherever you go, or do you think people are different wherever you go?
I think they're pretty much the same. I think that people sometimes we have very different viewpoint, but a lot of it is due to circumstances, their training. I think that we all, as I've said this before, we all laugh and cry in the same language. We may have different viewpoints about this and that and the other, but we all have the same feelings that makes us feel like crying or sad, or the same experiences that make us happy. So I say we laugh and cry in the same language wherever we are. You know, I hope that, and I think that there's always room for improvement, and I sincerely hope that we'll make it, and that we will have leaders and people that are not as interested in financial gains as they are in making the world a better place for everybody.
How would you do it if you were leader of the world? If you were the empress of the world, what would you do?
No, that's a big question. I think the first thing it would be try to do would be to recruit helpers, to have as many as you can, because it's doing things by yourself is pretty hard. But if you have enough influence and can get help, use the power of persuasion to get people to see the light, to see it better, that's good. I think it isn't. I don't mean just going around preaching like I'm better than you, or you must see my way to be right. I don't mean it that way, but there's a saying, to your own self be true, and then you won't be false to any man. And I think that maybe that's right. If you feel true and what you're doing is right yourself, then I think that you're being true and not being false to anyone else. What's holding them back is probably lack of knowledge of the other. What we don't know about there's a lot that we don't know, more than we do know about other people, and what, if it does, I think it is lack of knowledge, understanding, and some of it is because of the way we were treated. We're apt to treat other people the same way. Well, yeah, sometimes a cultural difference does make a difference, but I think we need to understand that we aren't all raised the same. We don't all have the same background, and what seems perfectly right in some places may not seem that way in others. And I think it's good if we can accept people for what they are, and if we can live our own lives as an example rather than preaching at them. Is what we do and how they see it, and how you act has more influence than what you say. As you know, the old saying, talk is cheap, but it takes money to really do anything. So
Do you think you've been happy here in the U.S., or is there any other country that you would live in if you had a choice besides this one?
I've been happy. I have lived in many countries. I have been for periods of time in different countries, and I've been happy wherever you. It's something that's in you more than it isn't the country. I don't think you should depend on the geographic situation or social to make you happy, so to speak. You have to think it through yourself and try to enjoy the moment, the time, and not, as I say, not worrying about yesterday. It's gone. Tomorrow isn't here. But try to enjoy today. That's my philosophy, summed up. And I think I've been more or less saying the same thing over and over again.
No, it's.
But that's how I feel. If you just try to make the best of today and don't worry about what happened yesterday or what's going to happen tomorrow, but just try to make the best of what's happening right now, then I think that in the long run you will be happier.
Right.
Because now turns into yesterday.
So if there was something you could change about your life, go back in time and change something about you personally in your life, would you do that? Or if so, what?
Well, I'm sure that I've made lots of mistakes that I didn't know they were mistakes at the time, and knowing that and going back, I probably would do different, but I can't, pick out one thing and say, well, I wouldn't. Sure, there's things maybe I wouldn't have done had I known better. A long ways from being perfect, but all you can do is try. And as I said, I just have that philosophy of saying, yeah, yesterday's gone and tomorrow isn't here, so just make the most of today and don't dwell on yesterday. It's gone. You can't do anything about it unless you could reap something that you learn from it. Otherwise, it's gone. And as I say, tomorrow isn't here, so just live it up today. Make the most of it. I think we all have potential, and a lot of us don't live up to it, including myself. We could do more. We don't really know what we are capable of doing until stress comes. But as I said, I don't know. I just think that you try to make the most of each day. Do the thing that seems to do the best that you can that day, and then forget about it. What makes me happy? Well, I think seeing my loved ones, my family, that they're contented, and that they're doing well, and that they're getting along makes me happy. Whenever any of my own kin, my loved ones, if they are having difficulties and things aren't right, then that saddens me. Oh, this is souvenirs from times past. They were all well, like there's the badge that my father had.
Can you just kind of hold it to the camera?
There were
maybe like this.
Badges of honor, and these were. I was told they were a bouquet made from the human hair of some of my ancestors, like my grandmother, who they were all had died before I was born. But anyway, these were mementos that my mother had saved because they meant something to the family, each of them.
What's the badge?
And
what's the badge in the middle there? Pure
one?
Food Commissioner?
What does it say? Oh.
Pure Food Commissioner?
Yes, well that was the badge that my father had when he was living. This was my hair. I had the Spanish influenza when they had that epidemic, and I lost all my hair. I was practically bald. Yeah, well, my father, of course, was in, and my husband later were both involved in public health positions, and these were all just mementos of my ancestors, and I just put them together because they were, just loose here and there, and decided to frame them.
What now? So your father, what exactly did he do for a living?
Well, he always had a political office. He was he started out as a farmer. He became, first he was the county assessor, and then he became he was with the Internal Revenue Department, and then he became Commissioner of Public Health for the state of Idaho. And he worked always in a political job of some type.
Did he enjoy his jobs?
What?
Did he enjoy his jobs?
Did he enjoy them?
Yeah.
Oh, I think so. He was a good public speaker, and they always had him. They had rallies in those days, political rallies, and he did a lot of campaigning for various political figures. And he was a very well-known citizen of Idaho. I think there's a whole history of him up there someplace. Anyway, he was much involved in Democratic politics, and I know Woodrow Wilson was the man that had appointed him, and he was always, when my younger brother was just learning, when he was learning to talk, and he taught him to say, "I'm a Democrat, a Mormon, an American citizen, and true blue for Woodrow Wilson." He had to use his little speech when he was young.
That brings up a good question. We didn't even talk about your relationship with the Mormon Church. We didn't even talk about that.
Well,
what
Well,
is your relationship with that?
Well, I was born. My parents, my grandparents, were converted to the Mormon Church in Wales and came to the United States and across the plains and settled. They thought they were settling in Utah, but when the lines were drawn, they were really in the southern part of Idaho, just over the Utah border. And the reason they came there was because of their being converted to Mormonism. So I was raised in the church. I was baptized when I was 8 years old. That was the age that we baptized. And I was a member and have always been a member. That was it.
What is it that you have gained from your relationship with the religious organization? What is it that you've gotten out of that?
Well, a lot of experience, of teaching, learning, a way of life, social situation. I don't know how to enumerate anything more. It's just.
So you liked it.
Of course. And I am a believer that you sort of get returns for what you give, you get back. You invest in something, you get returns. If you don't give anything, you shouldn't expect a return. And I've got. When I was younger, I did more work in the church. I worked with the young group. I worked with a group they called the Gleaner Girl, the young group, and I've done a lot of work when I was young, and they've been very good to me. They've been very good to me. They come and see me, and they here not too long ago, a group of the young men came and weeded my yard and cleaned it up, and it did things that I couldn't do, that they could see that I needed and I hadn't asked. But they've been good to me, and what else can I say?
Your husband, he was involved, he was a Mason, right?
That's right.
And I don't really know anything about that, and obviously we don't have too much more time, but maybe you could talk just a little bit about that.
Well, I don't know too much about the Masonic Lodge, but he joined it, and about all I didn't. We used to go to their dances and their parties and activities like that, but it was a men's organization. They had their own meetings. I naturally didn't attend, but
so it was a secret.
A lodge that he was to, but it was as far as I was concerned, it was a social organization.
But he enjoyed that.
What?
But he enjoyed that.
Oh yes, I'm sure.
Now was he
he did, or he probably wouldn't have done it.
Was he in a high ranking of that, or was he just a member, or how did that all work out?
No, he didn't. He was a member, but he didn't. Get that involved with it.
So
or whatever their lodge, their meetings, they're more or less secret. All I did was we always went to their dances and that, but social activities. But I never was involved in their other activities.
So you saw that as a positive thing. You saw that as a positive thing that he was involved with.
Oh sure.
You weren't worried about that.
That's right. No.
You didn't think they're trying to take over the world or anything like some people try to say about the Masons. Secret handshake,
That's right.
Well, we've got a couple more minutes. You want to say anything directly to the family that's going to be watching this, which I'm sure they all watch it. Every single one of them.
I don't. I just, with each of my children and my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren, I have a great deal of affection for them. I wish them nothing but the best. I hope that that their dreams will be realized, and I hope that their dreams are for things that are worth dreaming for. And if as I say, I do believe in the saying that as a man thinketh, so he is. And so I say, think positive, and do unto others as you would have others do unto you. And that's the best advice that I can give.